Hey everybody, Charles here. This week's episode is titled Lifelong Friendships Through Recreational Arson. I named it that because our guest is James Robert Phillips, my best friend from college, who I met 25 years ago while I was in the process of setting my living room chair on fire. I don't recall exactly why I was doing this, but I'm sure I had a good reason. Rob was walking around the corner of our dorm building as the flames were growing, and we started a conversation. Rob now works as a therapist and has extensive knowledge and experience in mental health, so I hope you enjoy hearing what he has to say. Please check our show notes for his contact info and links. Welcome to the Mindfully Masculine podcast with Charles and Dan, where we take a conscious, holistic, and direct approach to relationships, mental health, and self-improvement. For additional content, visit our website at mindfullymasculine.com. And to interact with us, our guests, and your fellow listeners, join the Mindfully Masculine group on Facebook.
Good afternoon, Charles. How are you?
Oh, good afternoon, Dan. I'm doing well. We have a very special guest with us today, and that would be me post first 5K that I've ever run, but also my friend Rob's on.
I mean, the second most important, obviously.
Clearly.
Obviously, I'm a completely different person now. So I've become an inspirational figure.
Yeah.
I ran a 5K in 37 minutes.
I believe it's pronounced perspirational, actually.
Yeah. Actually, I didn't sweat that much because I don't feel pressure the way most people do. But I ran my first.
It must
5K.
be nice being a sociopath. Yeah,
it is. It has downsides too.
You don't say.
But Saturday morning I did my first 5K. Mostly jogged it. I had to stop and slow down a bit to catch my breath. But 37 minutes. I decided to book it on Thursday with no preparation and then just go out there Saturday morning to see what would happen. And it was very cold. Lot of ladies pushing strollers waiting for me at the finish line that finished like way faster than I did. So that was humbling.
You couldn't hitch a ride?
I should have. Like, hey kid, why don't you get out of that thing? But it was I like the communal aspect of it. There were probably, I don't know, 100+ people that all did it. And it was in Claremont, so there's the Florida version of mountains.
Nice.
A lot of ups and downs, mostly downs, and it was something.
Now this was called the fastest 5K in Florida. Was this your fastest 5K?
It was my only 5K, so it was both my fastest and my slowest.
Bonus. There you go.
Yeah, so I guess depending on whether you're an optimist or a pessimist, you can call it what you will. The night before was rough. The night before, you and I went to the hibachi place. And I was overserved, which is a term typically reserved for alcohol consumption, but in this case, it was rice and steaks, and it was brutal. And then you and I went dancing afterward,
right? Which
also did not go great.
Yeah.
I had an experience with a seasoned citizen, where she asked me to dance. I was like, no, thank you. And then she talked me into it, and I was like, okay, fine. And then I got up and we start dancing, and I did not recognize what she was doing. It was supposed to be a swing dance. And I was like, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're doing. I can't do this. And she goes, well, you can just do whatever you want. And I was like, seriously, I can do whatever I want? And she goes, yeah, absolutely. I said, I'm going to go sit down. And I did that, and she walked away very angry. And then shortly after that, I pulled my my Irish exit, where I just kind of slipped out the door and went home. And again, because it's this new hobby has its work cut out for it, because I've yet to have a dancing experience that's more fun than just laying in bed watching Star Trek: The Next Generation reruns.
Is that true? Even with your lessons with Victoria? I think that's not accurate.
When it's just me and my coach in a room together.
I mean, you're driving like an hour and a half each way for the lessons. You've done it multiple times. So I think that's bull. I think you do enjoy the lessons with Victoria.
I drove 4 days in my 2011 Toyota Yaris to climb Half Dome, and that was miserable as well, but I still made the drive.
Okay. All right.
So
I've got nothing.
Don't you dare.
I've got nothing then. Okay.
No, I enjoy the lessons. I just don't enjoy performing in public because I'm not the best person at it. And so
surprise, you'll never be the best person at dancing, at ballroom dancing, because there's people in there that are just like ridiculous. It's like they're walking on water. I mean, it's like flawless. Yeah. You're never going to be the best. I hate
so you're saying I should probably quit.
Yes, exactly. Just give up. Give up.
Message received.
Just give up now. Stop wasting your money.
Yeah, and my time. And then let's see what happened Sunday. So Sunday, I made the best omelet for breakfast I've ever made or eaten in my entire life. It was so amazing.
Wow.
We're talking spicy breakfast sausage, habanero peppers, green onions, and cheddar jack cheese with a remember when we after Halloween we ate at the Peach Valley Cafe for breakfast, and they sell this peach and onion hot sauce that you can buy by the bottle. I bought a bottle of that last time I was there, put that on top, and a nice healthy dollop of sour cream. It was the best omelet I've ever had in my life.
Nice.
So it was a good way to recover from the 5K and the dancing and all that stuff.
It sounds like you earned that omelet. Yeah,
I think I did. And then let's see, last night I had a coffee date with a young lady.
Well, how'd that go?
It was good. I enjoyed talking to her, learned a lot about her career, and she grew up in Montana, so that was interesting to hear about what it's like to grow up in Montana.
Oh yeah, that's gotta be different.
Yeah, and it was a very pleasant conversation. And then I left the date to go to the Joss Stone Corinne Bailey Rae concert alone because I will learn to love live music this year, watch and see.
Nice.
And I did enjoy it a lot. It was good. The Dr. Phillips Center is still you still have to wear a mask for inside concerts, which I wasn't eating or drinking, so I basically wore the little disposable mask they gave me the whole time. And I'm not complaining about it, but it's also not ideal.
Yeah.
But I understand why they feel they have to do it, but it's just like, oh, why can't this thing be over yet? I don't want to cover the moneymaker.
So yeah, I mean, so speaking of
now, you guys go ahead and try to compete with that amazing weekend. Good luck.
Yeah. Well, I'd never watched Game of Thrones before, so I started that. A friend got me into that, and she helped frame a lot of the background, which kind of helped me get through the first episode, and watched a few of those. And yeah, it's pretty good. So I'm going in with the attitude of be open to finding out the value of something new, of these new experiences, right? Trying not to just assume anything, and kind of, be a detective and, hey, look for why this is so popular. Look for the value in whatever that is. Right. And it doesn't mean, it doesn't mean I have to like it or really get into it, but it'll help me understand why there's some value there, and then just appreciate that. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do for 2022. Just be more open to new experiences, and not just dismiss it right away. So I did that with Game of Thrones, and it worked out because I actually like it now. So
yeah, I tried to learn a few years ago that there's a difference between me not liking something and that thing not being any good. Like it's very possible that, especially when it comes to TV shows and movies and books and things like that, it's possible that something can be very well done and just not my kind of thing. So just because I don't like it doesn't mean that it's garbage.
Yeah,
it usually means that, but not always.
And how about you, Rob? How was your weekend? Obviously, it's too cold to have any fun. I didn't do anything great. I engaged in some parenting endeavors, and I went to the gym, and that was pretty much the big part of my weekend. I do want, since I'm a therapist, it's my job to make people feel better. Not really. I want to make Charles feel better about his 5K. Okay. Oh. I used to run a 10K regularly in Ocala, and I about drove myself to a heart attack trying to beat the dog with 3 legs.
Oh my God.
So I was almost died 33 years old right there on Main Street in Ocala trying to beat the dog.
That's amazing. Oh, that's great. It was rough. I had set a very arbitrary goal of 32 minutes and something seconds because I found, I Googled how long should it take a 44-year-old man to do a 5K? And that was the number that came up. So I was like, all right, that's my goal. And I missed it by like 5 minutes. And so as soon as I got home, I immediately booked another 5K for this upcoming weekend. So, and then I told some friends about 5Ks, and then I was like, oh, I'm starting to get into it. And they were both like, oh, I'm doing this one. I'm doing this one. So now I'm doing 4 5Ks in a 14-day period.
Wow. And this is all from reading Goggins' book, right? Is that basically what how this happened?
Yes, David Goggins has inspired me to stop being such a baby when it comes to doing hard things with my body. Although I just got to this interesting part of his book. The book is Can't Hurt Me, and it's a really good audio book, because what happens is he doesn't read the audio book. The guy who's like his ghostwriter reads it, but then like after every chapter, the two of them have a conversation with each other about the chapter that was just read.
Oh, that's great.
It's really good, because it's sort of like it's like a podcast and an audiobook together. It's so good. I'm really enjoying it.
I like that.
And but I did find out today that David Goggins got married to a girl that he met in junior high or high school, and then they got divorced, and then he remarried her, and they got divorced a second time. So I don't care how many 100 miles he runs. I've never done that. So I got something on him. I'm never going to marry the same woman and then divorce her.
So you're calling him indecisive. I just want to make sure we have all this down.
I mean, obviously I wouldn't
when
say
it comes on the podcast.
I was going to say, I would never say it to his face.
Yeah.
But you know, look, that's one. I mean, yes. Did he make it through 3 Navy SEAL Hell Weeks? Sure. But he voluntarily went through 2 hell marriages, and I have not done that.
I automatically feel so much better than him right now.
It's crazy. Him and I think Elon Musk and him both did that. They both remarried the same woman, then divorced her again.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not saying that's never the move, but I mean, guys, if you're listening to this and you had a great experience marrying a woman that you already divorced once, go ahead and write us a letter and tell us. That's mindfullymasculine@gmail.com. We will interview you and make a whole show about you. But yeah, so it's a very inspiring book, and it definitely, it's so interesting. I mean, his whole mindset is all this stuff he does with his body, all these long distance races that he runs. He's like, all he's looking to do is make his mind stronger, and his body doing these things is just a side effect. His only goal is to make a stronger mind. And the way you do that is by activities that also then make your body stronger. But the goal is not his body. The goal is not to put X number of miles up on the board. He's just trying to make the strongest mind he can possibly make.
So what do you think he should have strengthened to not marry his wife a second time? Would it be body or mind, do you think, for that?
Well, kind of both, because what had happened was he, after they divorced, he started sleeping with her again, and she done come up pregnant. So that's why he remarried her the second time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was neither body or mind that got involved with that decision. It was more
or both, depending on your perspective. Yeah. So that's what I guess that's what brought him into it.
Yeah, it wasn't premeditated. Got it.
Correct. Yeah. But but still, there are in 21st century America, we do have some sophisticated technology to prevent that kind of thing from happening. And he apparently did not employ those.
Yeah, man.
So, yeah. So, but, he's still, like we've talked about before, Dan, just because somebody is really good in one particular area, they don't have to be good at everything for you to take value out of their advice or their experience, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's absolutely true.
So Rob, you mentioned doing some parenting. What's the ages on your young ones again? I know one just had a birthday. Where are they at?
A 10-year-old girl and a soon-to-be 14-year-old boy.
Wow, that's tough, man. What's it like living with some people, human individuals of those ages? That doesn't seem easy.
Well, I'm not going to assign value to one over the other, but one is really easy to live with and one is really hard to live with.
Rob,
which one is which?
Rob, at what age did you start parenting them, do you think? Would you consider you had a pretty powerful parental influence at what ages?
Probably 3 or 4 years. The Cody, the girl, she's I've been around over half her life. So I'm one of the guys that's going to be keeping her off the pole after she turns 18. So that's pretty happy about that. But it's a really good thing for me. It's a positive thing for me. I'm hoping it's a positive thing for them, but we won't know until, maybe they're talking about me in therapy in 20 years. So that could be a thing too.
Yeah, it'll be, you really don't know how well of a job you've done with a child until they have a child of their own. And you're like, oh man, this went way worse than I thought it did.
Maybe we should start developing surveys for kids. Let's get some reviews, right? I mean, we've got Amazon reviews for everything. Why not let the kids review the parents once in a while, right? See how we're doing.
Yeah, that would be interesting because, I mean, in some ways, I would almost say the parents with the best reviews are probably the worst parents, right?
You never know, right? You don't want to be a friend, right? That's
yeah.
An issue, right?
all the cool moms and the cool dads would probably get the highest ratings, and those kids were turn out to be the burden on the rest of our society. But yeah, that's interesting. Okay, well let's start jumping into some real material. Rob, you're the expert, so we're going to ask you questions as if you're an expert. But first, why don't you give us a little rundown on your life story leading up to at least the point where everything changed for the better and you met me?
Okay, so let's just go straight to that. I am a pretty typical guy raised in Florida, never lived anywhere else, grew up in a lower middle class family with those type of values, went to college with you. Obviously, my life improved like tenfold at that point. Career-wise, I worked as a therapist early on. When I became bored with that, I became an administrator and worked in different executive positions. All the way up to where I had a C-suite position. And at some point I got really tired of that. And I moved on to being a therapist again. So I'm working on a new project now, a couple of particular things having to do with men's mental health and family restoration that I'm really excited about. That's the short part.
Okay.
The real funny part of this story is I made the decision to go back to therapy after having a really good conversation with Dan. And I went to thank Dan for it not too long ago. And Dan says, I don't remember that.
I didn't. I really didn't. But I'm happy if it made you happy, man. That's awesome. That's all I wanted. Maybe I saw that you kind of lit up when you were talking about it. That's probably what I noticed. That's probably why I mentioned something.
Well, there you go. Look at the mess you've got me in.
You're welcome.
So what is your day-to-day like, or even a typical week look like, Rob? What kind of work do you do day in, day out? How many patients do you see or deal with? Is it mostly telehealth or in person? How does that break down?
I'm about half and half telehealth in person right now. A lot of my clients are specialty clients. I have a lot of clients that are just for executive leadership training type things. So I have some CEOs of companies, some guys that manage some pretty high profile athletes, those kind of things.
Okay.
And I also have regular clients. I have a lot of adolescent boys on my caseload. I have a lot of grown men, and for some reason, I really resonate with grandma as a therapist. So I have a lot of older women clients too.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. Well, let's talk a little bit about the male clients. Not so much the boys, but Dan and I were talking about this, not too long ago, and typically it seems like, for guys to either go to the doctor or go to a therapist, it's not usually, hey, my life's operating at a 9 and I just want to get that last 10% so everything's perfect. Usually the house has to be on fire for a guy to walk through the office of any kind of a health professional. And I would assume that mental health, that's usually the case as well, right?
Oh, for sure. There's a lot of shame and stigma still attached to a man receiving mental health treatment. There's also the notion that, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to cry and talk about my feelings, and somebody's going to tell me they feel sorry for me. And a lot of guys aren't interested in that. My clients certainly aren't going to get that, but I know a lot of people probably do.
Yeah.
But it is tough, right? The demographic I shoot for is a demographic that doesn't get in there. 25 to 45-year-old men. These guys are not getting treatment, and you can see it in society. You look around; these guys aren't getting the help they need, and we see the effects of that. So it's really difficult. Myself, I went to therapy when I had to, when there was nothing else to do, and I knew something wasn't right, and I had to make that decision. And most people I see, it's no exception. Same deal.
Yeah, certainly that's been my experience. I went to therapy when I was a kid, which wasn't my choice. It was my grandparents. At about the time that my my mother skedaddled out of my life, and they were like, okay, you need to go to a child psychiatrist. And it was funny. I remember most of the sessions were just us playing board games. And I remember the board games. I don't remember anything we talked about like my situation or how I was feeling. But then, then I found out later, oh, that's how you deal with little boys when you're trying to give them therapy. And all I remembered was, we played this weird like knockoff Dungeons and Dragons game. And like I would go once a week every Thursday and we'd go play that game and we'd talk about stuff. But I never remembered talking about stuff. I just always remembered outperforming my psychiatrist at this game and kind of thinking, okay, who's this guy to give me advice when he can't even beat me at this dumb game.
I don't do board games, but I certainly see those things being used a lot with under 10 kids, boys and girls. And
you mostly shoot dice?
You know what I do? I play cards with people all the time.
Oh, really?
Session, yeah, all the time.
Interesting. All right, I'll next time I have a friend that I think needs some serious psychological help, I'll break out the Uno deck and try to see if that gives me an in to tell them to get their life together.
You're going to take another person hostage with your Uno deck.
Exactly. That's right. I remember I brought the Uno deck on my birthday cruise.
Yeah.
We let's see, what birthday was that? That was my 42nd birthday. The three of us went on a cruise together, and I brought Uno, and we would sit in the piano bar and play Uno. And boy, does that really grease the wheel socially to get involved and meet new people. It's like, oh, look at the three nerds playing Uno over there. But I enjoyed it.
If you ever needed proof that me and Dan love you so much as that cruise, not only did we play Uno, but we went and played trivia for you so you could win the prize at the end of the week while you were in bed.
That's right. Oh my gosh,
awesome.
I remember that now. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that has to happen when you go on a cruise with me is you have to go out and have fun while I'm napping so that I can just show up and the fun's already started.
Yeah.
And and it's great. I remember I was thinking about the cruise earlier today, leading up to us doing this, and I remembered when the clock struck midnight and it was my birthday, and one of you guys, I forget who, came over with a champagne flute, and I was like, awesome, I get to have some champagne on my birthday, and I sipped it and it was full of Fireball.
Oh, that was not me.
That's probably me. That was probably me.
I hate Fireball. When I saw the champagne flute, I got so excited. I was like, "Oh, look at me! I'm so fancy. I get to sip on some champagne for my birthday." And then I take a nice big gulp, and it was Fireball. So disappointing. Okay, Rob. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, I know that when we went to college together for your undergraduate degree and for my 2.5 semesters of hanging out, there weren't a lot of people with a heavy clinical background at that college. So was there anything that, as you started taking classes there and getting ready for a career in counseling, was there anything that you kind of wish somebody would have clued you in on back then when you were like freshman, sophomore in college, that would have prepared you more for what you're doing now?
Oh, for sure. No one told me like what the nature of the field really was. And part of it probably has to do with the school we went to. They're geared more towards a pastoral type of counseling instead of a clinical counseling.
Okay.
The field, I had this thought in my head when I first started being a therapist that I was going to sit in my office. I was going to wear my sweater and I was going to dispense my wisdom to people as they came to me, and I was going to fix their lives. Sounded great to me. Not what it is at all. It's a lot of tedious paperwork. It's a lot of tedious relational things. There's places you work is very poorly paid, usually on the lower end. If somebody would have told me that, I would have probably still got the degree, but I probably would have backed it up with something else, like an MBA or something like that.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess, because in most fields, people who know the technical function as well as how to run a business doing that thing, that's pretty rare. So I can imagine that would be valuable in the mental health field as it would be in any field. I mean, Dan and I have certainly seen people in the tech field where all they have are the hard skills for fixing broken computers and none of the people skills and none of the business skills. And as a result, the organization kind of suffers for it.
Yeah, I mean that very thing happened to me in college. My degree was in nutrition. I was about to graduate, and as part of the Nutrition Honor Society, I was like, oh, I worked at a local hospital as a dietitian's assistant. I was going to be an RD. So as most people, that's what they were going to do coming out of college. And so I was like, oh well, I know a couple of dietitians who work at the hospital. They graduated from Rutgers as well. They are more than happy to come back and talk to us. And they all basically said, don't do it. They all basically were all they were out of it. They'd been dietitians like a couple of years. And they're like, yeah, the doctors, who had like 1-2 classes, they override our diet orders, and we've had like 4 years or 5 years of experience talking about, and then learning about this, and we get no respect and we don't get paid well. Yeah. And they were all leaving and going back to school to become teachers. And so after that, I was just like, yeah, I'm not. And that's when I decided to go into computers.
And Dan, the points made as a therapist too is the same thing. Like one of the things that when I was kind of reflecting on this, and you bring that up reminds me, like as a therapist, the personal toll that it takes on you is substantial. Okay. There's like an ongoing joke with therapists that if you have a personal problem going on in your life, just give it a couple days and it'll sit right there in front of you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so you can work through it with the person sitting across the table.
Well, you should refer them out, but it didn't work that way, does it?
Oh yeah. Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a great question, Rob. So I mean, would you say, for your stress reduction? I mean, because dealing with other people's problems and anxieties all day long, that again, it takes a toll on you. So I mean, I know you love working out. I mean, is that, what kinds of things do you do to keep you from, just dealing with all of, all that stress? How do you release that? What's your favorite ways to do that?
Well, there's a couple things, right? There's one way where I'm really cynical and I don't like anybody. So that helps.
Okay. Yep, that's a good start.
but in all seriousness, like what you said, bringing up the gym is helpful, right? You got to get up at 4 a.m. every day, get my butt in the gym for 2 hours. And that's very helpful. I find that to be a big benefit. It's a big anxiety reducer. If I don't do that, I don't have like a good expenditure of energy. I find that my anxiety runs a little high during the day, especially working with people. Another thing that I find is get enough sleep too. I've worked in manual labor and I've worked in all kinds of different labor. I worked in restaurants and all these things. I will promise you the most tired I ever am is after I see 9 clients back to back.
Oh, gee.
That is the most tired I will ever be.
And, I would think also, I would think that because they have different issues and things like that, it's kind of like multitasking for you. Like your brain is going down one road with one client, and then you have to kind of switch gears a little bit, I would think, for the next one. And I know for me, that drains me so quickly, that just different wavelengths. So yeah. Wow.
And as a therapist, like, I'll be honest with you, like therapy is draining for the therapist. Right. Like this, I have some clients that I'll sit there and I'll talk to, and we'll have a good conversation for an hour and it won't be tough at all. And then I'll have other clients that I see, and it's a real hard time getting through the session, maybe because they're not really moving the right direction, or it's really sad and it really bothers you. So that can be a real hardship too sometimes.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, that does sound rough. I think I told both. Well, Dan knows because Dan gave me his old Whoop band, so I've started monitoring my vital statistics a little bit more, and I've been shocked that it's telling me I need like 9 hours of sleep a night to be operating, at the top end of what I can do, and it's like, man, and what I usually get is about between 6 and 7, and I thought 6 and 7 was probably enough for me, but this thing is saying, you need 8 hours and 49 minutes a night to achieve.
And then that's not even includes the time in bed, right? Because so of that time, you might need 11 hours in bed in order to get that 8.5 hours worth of sleep, because you're not sleeping that whole time. So yeah, it was awakening for me as well when I got that information. How bad I was sleeping.
It's like, and who, I wonder when this whole thing started about the, sort of the peer pressure of, hey, the guy who sleeps the least is the most effective, where it's like the science does not seem to back that up. I don't know if it ever did, but it's like people wear it as a badge that they, I can get by on 4 hours of sleep, 5 hours of sleep at night. I was like, hey, you probably can't. It'd be hard to imagine that people are operating at 100%, literally getting half the sleep that I'm supposed to get according to this app.
I'm that guy. I'm that guy. I'm like, give me 5 hours, I'm good.
Do you ever get much more than your usual, and do you notice a difference that you feel a lot better when you do?
No, I do. All joking aside, I get probably 6, 7 hours of sleep only because I go to bed at 7:30.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that's the thing is there's a lot of fun things that happen at night that I feel like I'm missing out on. But I know, I mean, my alarm goes off at 5, and I know that when it goes off at 5, I'm gonna want to wake up and do the things I like to do before I start my day. But man, like last night, I didn't get home from the concert I went to until midnight. I rolled in and I was like, geez, this is going to be rough. I mean, if I had the luxury of, sleeping until 8 or 9, hey, no problem. But it's like, no, I know at 5 o'clock, this is going to go off and it's time to get up and make my bed and make my breakfast and write in my journal and meditate. And it's freezing cold, literally freezing cold in my part of Florida. And it's a lot to think about, but the habit of waking up early is worth it to me. I'll put in a rough night and a rough morning occasionally to build that habit of getting up early and getting remember that old concept of pay yourself first, before you pay your bills, put your money in savings. That's kind of what I've started doing with my day, where I wake up early and I pay myself with taking a walk, journaling, meditating, all that stuff. And then I'll start answering phone calls about somebody's broken printer after I've taken care of Charles. And I like it. I recommend it to everybody. Wake up, go to bed earlier and wake up earlier and get that start to your day. Even though, I've kind of always felt like a little bit of a morning person. And I know some people certainly are not that, but it's a good time of day to get stuff done without being interrupted.
Yeah. Things are quieter for sure. Yeah. And definitely a lot easier to do whatever you want to do and not be interrupted. And, you're not getting phone calls or texts and all that other stuff either. So yeah, for sure. I agree.
All right, Rob. So this is a question I came up with that I thought you in particular would probably have a very interesting answer to this. And you can pick whether you want to address this to your personal life or your professional life, but what's been your most valuable failure? How'd you recover from it? And what was the thing that you learned that you think has made you better?
This is when things get real serious, isn't it?
Depends on you.
Yeah, I know. Far and away, my most valuable failure was my first marriage.
Yeah,
easily. Like I was ill prepared, and my behavior was horrific. I was a terrible person to be married to. I was unfaithful. I was difficult. I showed every example of a bad partner. Not to say that my ex-wife was perfect,
right?
But I definitely failed in every way possible. And upon ending that marriage, I continued to fail with women in a similar way. So I definitely would say those two things kind of just meld together. I would say that what was valuable to me about it was, even though it was so much time, right? You lose so much time in a bad marriage.
Yeah.
Is I learned about myself. I learned about my resilience. I learned about the good qualities I had as opposed to the things that I was acting out in my marriage. When I saw a therapist, that's one of the things he pointed out, because you have a bad marriage and you have something that you're failing at because, well, you don't want to be there or you don't find it valuable. And I remember my therapist telling me, he's like, you're not as bad as you think you are. You're just really unhappy. And that was true for me. And I definitely regret my behavior in the time. I regret how I handled my friendships. I regret how I handled my relationships, and I regret how I handled my ex-wife, but I am so much better for learning from that. Right. I learned to change my behavior. I learned how to approach relationships differently. I became a better professional. I became a better clinician, all because of that failure and that pain. And I'll tell you, anybody that's been divorced knows that kind of pain, right? I remember when the divorce was finalizing and I had been away for the weekend, and I get back to my house, right? Get back to my house, and my house is absolutely empty, except there's a mattress on the floor and a TV on the floor, and that's it. And that's a hell of a place to start. That's a hell of a place to start rebuilding. And and the crazy part was I wasn't even that sad about it, because I was just glad to be alone and glad to be independent.
Wow.
And it was really an eye opener. I'm sure anybody that's had even a bad relationship knows that when you're in that, you don't see a way out. And I remember sitting there in a really desperate situation where my behavior had found me in a really bad situation with, people I was dating outside my marriage and behaviors I was exhibiting. And I was just like stressed absolutely to the maximum. And I said to myself, if I ever get out of this, I will never make these mistakes again. And I didn't. And I made new ones. But I didn't make those mistakes again, and I'm happy that I was able to grow from that experience. But a significant failure.
Rob, so if you could rewind time, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently?
I would have married somebody that I could have sustained a good marriage to, right? I would have got married a lot later. I was in my early 20s. I didn't know what it was to be married. I didn't know what it was to be a man. I didn't know what it was actually like to function as a man and how you meet those expectations that are put on a man, especially in a marriage. I would have done it much later. I would have waited to be established. I was just ill-suited and ill-prepared for everything that happened. But I did have a lot of social pressure, right? Like your parents are like, oh, you have to get married. And then you go have that religious Christian upbringing where you're like, man, I can't be having this sexual intercourse with somebody I'm not married to. I gotta make this right. And there's a lot of that kind of pressure. You make those decisions based on the things that are in front of you. And yes, if I could go back, I would do it completely differently.
Yeah, I remember when you told me, I believe you told me about your marriage problems the day that my ex-wife was having surgery and almost died. And until then, I had no idea that you were going through this stuff, which, in some ways, the end of your marriage was also a failure on my part, because, when I'm in a relationship with a woman, one of the common mistakes I make is to get so completely enmeshed with her. She becomes my best friend at first, and then eventually she's my only friend, and I'm spending all my time with her. And that was certainly the case with me and my ex-wife, where I was completely oblivious to what was going on with you while you were going through it, because we just, when I think about the stuff that you and I used to, when we were roommates, we would lay in bed and just talk about our lives and the stuff we were thinking about till 4 or 5 in the morning sometimes. And then not many years later, your marriage is imploding, and I have no idea that it's going on because my head was too far in the sand of my marriage, and I just had no idea. And so one of the mistakes that I'm never going to make again is ignoring my male friendships when I get into a relationship with a pretty girl that I'm all excited about, because not only does it hurt my friendships, but it also puts a huge strain on the relationship I have with my partner, because she becomes my everything socially.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to pile on here, but yeah, me too. It's the same thing. Like I feel like I'm just saying it to be part of the club, but honestly, I do the same exact thing I have with all of my, Charles, exactly what you said is I start to look for that one person to fulfill all my needs. I mean, I keep occasional, acquaintances and friends, occasionally, talk or whatever, but definitely not spending as much time and even not even alone, not doing stuff for myself by myself. Even found and that's not fair to her either. That's completely unrealistic to think that one person is going to be able to check all those boxes. And so and one of those things I realized, going through the No More Mr. Nice Guy book and talking to you, that's just something I came to realize about myself as well. So I'm working on that too.
Yeah, some of the best advice Glover gives in his book is maintaining male fellowship.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, 100%. It's but it's so hard because we don't need to spend time with other guys to fight off the tribe that's trying to invade us. We don't need to spend time with other guys to hunt for food anymore. And so those very real requirements are gone now. So our bodies and our brains trick us into, hey, the more time you spend with this woman, the more likely you'll produce more and more offspring to get your DNA to the next generation.
Yeah.
And the stronger you'll make your relationship with her. So by all means, have all your fun, spend all your hobbies, all your male friendships, go ahead and put all those to the side so that you can spend every minute with this girl. And it'll improve your odds for being with her and having lots of kids, and you guys will be happy together forever. But spoiler alert, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it most certainly does not. One of the things that was really eye-opening to me over time is exactly what it looks like to have a healthy relationship with a partner.
Mm.
Yeah. Talk about that a little bit.
I obviously I'm remarried right now, and I've been with Vanessa in a dating relationship / marriage for about 6 years. All right. And I remember when we first started dating that I was bringing some unhealthy behaviors that was from previous relationships to that dating relationship. And I'm not saying that she was perfect by any means. I'm sure she was doing the same, but I noticed those behaviors. I noticed they were impacting the relationship. I noticed they were impacting interactions. I noticed they were impacting my demeanor. And I remember one time I was having a disagreement with her about something, and Charles actually checked me on it and said, "Hey, you don't sound like you're sticking to the plan there, man. You don't sound like you're following through on what you need to follow through on." And I was irritated for a second, but I was like, "Damn it, he's right." And so I began adjusting the way I handle my relationship. And I have this joke. I think I tell people I haven't broken frames since 2018. but that, in all seriousness, I think when you look at guys having a good relationship with a partner, one of the things that's key to that is good emotional regulation. And when I have guys in my office and I'm working with my clients, the first thing I go after is emotional regulation. There's some things you'll hear people say that are in bad relationships where you'll talk to the couple and the husband and wife will be there, and the wife will say, "Well, I'm the logical one and he's the emotional one in the relationship." And I'm like, "Ooh, red flag."
Yeah.
Okay, because this guy's not regulating emotionally. And regulating emotionally isn't just the message of, "Oh, I can handle my emotions." It's, I'm safe.
Right.
I can handle the things around me because I can regulate my emotions. I can handle hardship without crying or yelling or punching holes in the drywall.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
One of the things I've read, I've learned recently in the last couple of months is just this, the overwhelming pressure that men feel in dealing with anxiety. And I don't mean, and Dan and I have talked about this, I've learned to look at anxiety much more broadly as I have before, where it doesn't necessarily mean you're having panic attacks and you're hyperventilating. You have to, breathe in a brown paper bag to stop from passing out. You can operate with a very constant low level of anxiety of just thinking, what if the future isn't okay? What if I'm not going to be okay? And the interesting thing about it is, as soon as you start feeling that anxiety, no matter what brings it about, your body goes into that survival mode, and you get so self-centered. You can't really think about anything having to do with your partner, their long-term well-being. All you're thinking about is yourself. And Dan and I were talking about this recently, like especially going through like a breakup experience, when a guy is being broken up with by the person that he's with, immediately you start feeling this anxiety, and it's all about, what can I do to soothe myself? Regardless, this person's saying, I don't want to be with you anymore. And you immediately try to talk them out of it. You try to, figure out, what can I do to feel better? What can I do to feel better? And it's ultimately a self-serving attitude that you just don't know. You don't have the ability to turn off.
Yeah. So Rob, where do you start with guys who come in who need, emotional regulation? How do you start with somebody like that?
Well, generally guys see me with relationship issues. That happens a lot, and guys see me that have problems with their interaction with people around them. And I make emotional regulation really simple for people, right? I tell them to remember 3 things. If you remember 3 things, you remember these 3 things. If you do these 3 things in interaction, you're going to appear like an emotionally regulated individual. And I wish I came up with this on my own, but I used to teach de-escalation for the mentally ill, and this is what they tell those people to do when you're de-escalating mentally ill. So this is the same way you emotionally regulate, right? When you talk to somebody, you want to maintain the same rate, tone, pitch, and volume of speech. Okay. When you elevate your speech up or down, or you yell or anything like that, it immediately muddies the message to that person, because what they're reading is your emotional response. They're not reading, what you're saying. All right. Also, you need to make sure you eliminate your nonverbals. All right. If I'm talking to you and I just roll my eyes and sigh like that, you already know that I don't want to hear what you have to say.
Wow. Yeah.
And the third thing is, the minute it becomes personal, conversation is over. Okay. Anybody that's been in a bad relationship knows that you'll get there to the point where you're just saying the nastiest things to each other you possibly can think of. And that doesn't do any good to the relationship, doesn't do anything good to the person that's saying it, because it always becomes something you have to apologize for later.
Yeah.
So
that's really interesting. It's all the exact opposite of what they tell you when you give like a speech, when you learn how to do public speaking, right? They tell you, don't be monotone, and, use your hands and your body language, and be, and it it's the exact opposite. So yeah, that's really interesting.
And it's really hard to do, right? And like it's one of the hardest things to do when I'm having a disagreement with Vanessa over something. Somehow she still sees me as a condescending bastard. but she I think it does, it's beneficial in that, I'm not yelling, I'm not screaming. I'm, we're trying to work something out as opposed to just trying to get, see who can yell the loudest to get their point heard.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it almost sounds like, Dan and I were talking recently. I shared a video with him. I was watching a video from back in, I guess it would have been like 91. Remember when Bill Clinton was running for president?
Yep.
And he was doing these town hall meetings, and the way he was able to connect with people, while he was doing his town halls, like he would walk up to the person, he would hold eye contact with them. And it's almost like when you're in a conflict with someone and you want to keep it de-escalated, you almost want to keep your communication with them frontal lobe to frontal lobe, where when you're trying to win somebody over, like Dan was saying, you want it to be amygdala to amygdala.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. That's a really good way of putting it. I like that.
Yep.
And so, the more stressful situation you're in, the more thinking that has to happen for both people to get it back down, because you want to deal with people like you're two thinking individuals, where when you're trying to connect to somebody and make them feel good about themselves, make them feel good about you, you're kind of appealing to that lizard brain and trying to get it to feel like, oh, I'm safe, I'm secure.
So Rob, so when after you give those three guidelines to people, how do you have them practice that? Are there exercises you give them, or do you give them any kind of homework, or do they do that in therapy with you? How do they get better at that?
We practice that in session a lot. Okay. So we go through, like I'll ask to go through something that happened where they knew they lost their cool. And then we'll go through the whole thing and then kind of replay it. Because the thing happens when a guy or anybody gets angry, right? And you have an argument with somebody, what is the thing you do afterwards? Well, you think about what you should have said, or the witty thing you could have came up with, or so I give the people opportunity to do that session, and then we work through it in a different way. Okay. And it's a good thing for people to do, because they get to have that part of themselves satisfied. And you also get to come up with a better way of doing it. Also, I have them, just try with a easy interaction, right? With somebody they know they can talk to, that they can trust. And I try to refer to it like this. I say, look, you're not having a discussion about something that you're angry about. You're not having a discussion of something you're emotionally pressed on. Try to pretend like you're talking about the weather.
That's good.
And I find that people, it's hard to practice. It's hard to do. It's almost, to do it every time is probably nearly impossible, right? But if you begin your communication like that, then you can start on the road to other things, right? You'll see a lot of the men that I see, they have, issues with their relationships, right? And the issues that men have with relationships are predictable ones. I'm going to, buy this person all these things so they'll love me. I'm going to, like what Charles was talking about, I'm going to put my whole life aside and put every bit of energy into you, and this is going to make this relationship good. And what happens to a lot of these guys is they end up getting walked on, not really because of a character problem in the person they're with, but because that's the amount of value they're putting out there.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of work on that. And you'll find like guys will say something like, I've been with this person for 3 months and I've had sex twice and I'm really mad. Well, are you intentional about it? Do you talk about it, or do you just make these things up in your head where I've done this and I deserve sex? And like I do a lot of work like that. A lot of these kind of contracts people make with themselves, or
100%.
Yeah, the good old covert contracts.
Yep. That's the thing. And gosh, it is so much. Isn't it so much easier to deal with anybody, whether it's friendship or business or romantic relationship? Like two people that have good boundaries, just everything is so easy because everybody knows where everybody stands the whole time. Now, I mean, obviously I've never experienced it firsthand, but I've read about it. It sounds really nice.
Oh, that's great.
I mean, maybe someday, but yeah, when, to piggyback off what you're saying, I've got a couple of friends, older guys who are Italian, and I used to always joke that I'm the only Italian guy I've ever met who's not crazy. I don't say that anymore because I realize that I actually am. But when I was giving one of them some advice on a conflict he was having with somebody else, the advice I gave was the calmest person always wins the argument. Yeah. So the goal is not to make the best point. The goal is to just be the calmest person involved in the discussion, and you'll come away from that argument, that conflict, feeling like you won.
No.
But it's so hard to do in the moment when your stress hormones and stuff start firing off, and you start having that feeling like, okay, I'm going to fight for my survival, and it could just be your girlfriend saying, I didn't like the way that you changed the radio station when I was listening to my favorite song. And, for me, it's like, wait, that puts me on the defensive already. It's like, oh, hold on. I'm a great guy. Just because I had this one incident where I changed the station because I didn't want to hear your song, that doesn't mean I'm not a good guy. And I start doing that, keeping that ledger of all my good work that I want to offset, used to as a club to explain why I'm not guilty of the thing that clearly just upset you.
So Charles, knowing that you know that about yourself now, if you were in that situation in the future, how do you think you would handle it? How do you think you'd regulate yourself?
For me, it really depends on what other healthy habits and behaviors I've got going on in my life. So if I'm meditating and journaling and going for walks every morning, and I'm talking to my therapist once a week, then being that person who does those things is always at the top of my mind. And I feel pretty confident that I would be able to keep it together in situations where a year ago I couldn't have. Mm-hmm. But I could be wrong about that. I'll have to test it and see. But I do feel like when I'm building a healthy life for myself with good behaviors and good habits, then I stay in a different headspace than, this constant having to talk people into why I'm worth being around and why I'm worth spending time with, because, I do have that anxious attachment style, and it's, I don't know, Rob, in your experience, have you seen people successfully move from an avoidant or an anxious attachment style to actually being secure, or are they just able to integrate more secure behaviors into the relationships?
I'm glad you asked that. It's a great therapy question.
Thank you.
So this is the thing about behaviors, right? And people come to me all the time and they say something like, okay, I need to stop thinking this, or I need to stop feeling this. And I tell them the same thing every time. Well, good luck, buddy. you don't have a lot of control.
It's not like a light switch, right? Yeah.
It's like you're like, for me to say I don't want to feel that way ever again, that's going to be hard for me to do. Or I don't want that invasive thought that's going to make me think that my relationship's in jeopardy. That's a hard thing to do. But what I can do is I can behave. And what I think it's Glasser, counseling theorist I really like, he says all people do is behave, and there's a lot of juice to that. So when you change your behaviors, okay, you consistently change your behaviors, a really cool thing happens, is that your thoughts and your feelings follow suit.
Okay.
So when you, regardless of attachment style, if your behaviors are different in the relationship, you bring a different set of behaviors and activities to that relationship, your feelings and thoughts about that relationship are going to be different. I can tell you from experience, I had a very, very anxious attachment style in my first marriage, and it also in relationships afterwards. And my, change of behaviors over time, I don't feel that way anymore.
Okay.
And maybe things are going to go bad and I'll feel that way next week. But I can tell you as of right now, through my behavior change, I know I don't feel that way.
How much time of that different behavior do you feel like you had to string together before it sort of became your default?
Years.
Okay.
Years. And not me. I don't want to give everybody like an idea that, you're going to do that in a month. You're get that squared away, but it will get better. And it will get better, and it will get better. And over years, you'll find yourself, okay, I don't feel that way anymore. So it takes time. It takes effort. It's like, I always tell people that, they see me in therapy and they say, this isn't working as fast as I want it to work. Like, well, if you go to the gym, you got to put your reps in. Yeah. And you're not going to bench 300 pounds without putting your reps in. And you're not going to be able to have the control you want over your thoughts and feelings through behavior without putting your reps in.
Yeah, and it's going to be uncomfortable. You're not going to feel, it's not going to feel good because it's, right?
Therapy is not supposed to feel good. A lot of people have this thought where they go and see their therapist And they're like, man, I saw my therapist. I walked out of here feeling great. And I always think to myself when I hear that, man, a therapist didn't do their job.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, my ex would go to therapy and she'd come back and be like, "Oh, I don't like." She's like, "Yeah, I don't feel good. I just had a session with my therapist, or whatever." And I didn't understand that because even though my dad's a therapist, I've never gone to therapy. I mean, I've done a lot of personal development, but ironically, I've never gone to a therapist. But so when my ex was coming back after she was going, and she's just like, "Oh, I don't feel good. I need time alone right now. It was really," and I'm like, "Wait a minute." I was right there, Rob. I was like, shouldn't this be feeling good? Shouldn't you come out feeling like a champion? Like, yeah, that's interesting.
Well, Dan, I'm actually glad you mentioned that you haven't been to therapy, because Rob and I had something we wanted to share with you. We've both written some letters to say that your refusal to go to therapy has negatively affected us in the following ways.
My surprise podcast intervention. This is fantastic. Yeah. Has this ever been done before? I think we're breaking new ground here.
Mine says changes someone's life, doesn't remember.
Let's just put that up to the drinking.
Okay.
We'll have that intervention later.
Yeah, we'll say we're drinking. That's good.
Yeah, I found that I typically will have like every fourth or fifth session I have with Renata, my therapist, will be really light and really easy. And we'll basically just talk about, either a vacation I just got done with or one that I'm going on the following week, and we'll keep it really light. And then like every, 2 or 3, we'll have one that's just absolutely brutal that ruins the whole rest of my day. And most of them are kind of in the middle, where we have some good times and some rough times. But yeah, some of them, when you really get into the deep stuff, either stuff you're going through right now or stuff you're going through right now in the context of stuff you went through when you were a kid, it can completely zap the whole rest of my day. Is just me basically killing time trying to get through the workday so I can get an early dinner and go to bed even earlier than normal.
So for people like me and people listening like me, then why should we do this?
I'll give you some good reasons.
No.
The therapy is not for everyone. I'll tell you that right now.
Okay.
Therapy is something that it isn't a luxury item. It isn't something you do for fun. It's something you do when you want to improve something. Okay. And most people do put therapy off until they really need to improve it. And it's really a big deal.
Yeah.
Why I would recommend therapy to people is if you haven't identified something in your life and you have tried to do something with it, and you've tried to put it to the side, or you've tried to overcome it, and it continues to kick your butt and eat your lunch every day, then you walk into a therapist and you get that benefit, and a good therapist will walk you through that. And I know the things in my life that I look back on, and I had to figure out a way to get them out, and I couldn't do it on my own. Man, I'm so glad they're gone.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that's not part of my life anymore. So that's why you go to therapy.
I'm glad you asked the question, Dan, and I'm glad you brought that up, Rob. So the typical format of our podcast is Dan and I are working through books on personal development, self-improvement, and offering some review and analysis of those books. In your field, where do you see the role of things like self-improvement books, and how far does a self-improvement book take you? And then where does that meet up with, support groups and having a therapist and stuff like that? And are there any particular books that you'd recommend for men, especially that you find valuable and you give them homework?
Yeah. Obviously that's a loaded question, right?
Thank you.
But I'll tell you this, like when it comes to reading as part of therapy, there's not too many books, and I don't waver too far from what the recommendations I make. There's very few books that I've came in contact with that will give you an automatic net positive with that client. Okay. And I've encountered far too many books that will give you a net negative. Like there's a lot of, I'm not going to point out any, but there's a lot of books on relationships that are exceptionally detrimental to relationships.
Oh, really?
Very bad information. Yes.
Interesting.
And it isn't very helpful. It's like, so one of the books is that I always tell clients is obviously Glover's first book. No More Mr. Nice Guy is an amazing book, and I'm glad you guys have done some work with it on your podcast. It's one of the few things that I can hand a client, that a male client and a female client, by the way, that I can have them read through, and they're like, okay, this will make a difference in my life. This will make a difference in my relationship. So it's a great recommendation to make. With other clients, there's a book called Choice Theory by Glasser. It talks about relationships, talks about negative behaviors in relationships and positive behaviors and relationships is very valuable. Anybody that's interested in learning about being a therapist and what it's like to be a therapist, there's this book called Love's Executioner by Urban Yalom that he talks about all of his clients he had and how the ones they tell you, he's really transparent about the ones he didn't like. And it's really interesting about the ones that did better. It's not always the ones that he had a lot of regard for, the ones that he just kind of told the way it was. So those are some books that I really do appreciate. As far as like books that maybe are life-changing to me that I thought was, beneficial. I don't read a lot to change my life. I don't read a lot of self-help. I read for enjoyment, and I do it once a year.
Okay.
But one thing that really did change, one book that really changed my life and gave me a different way of looking at things, was The Road by Cormac McCarthy.
Oh, really?
I read it. Yeah, that is, man. One of my things I talk to clients about is I say, you need to overcome hardship. You need to take those hard things in your life. You need to get over them so you feel good about it. The road is a great example of why you overcome hardship, why you struggle with those things, and not because there's this great reward in the end. Because at the end of the book, it's not really a super reward, but the guy got accomplished what he was looking to get accomplished, and he wasn't there to see it, but it happened. And I like that. I like that concept, and it was a good book for me because I had this thought before I read it. Well, when you endure hardships and you deal with the hard things in life, then automatically things become amazing for you. No, they become better.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, I like that. We'll add that to the list when Dan and I are ready to maybe move into some fiction. That may be a good candidate for us to look at.
Now, I know have some good books I read for pleasure, but it's probably not applicable to the podcast.
Gotcha. Understood.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. I think I had one more question I wanted to ask you that, yeah, I did. So what are the kinds of things that you see men in particular, people in general, however you want to answer it? I imagine we have a lot of these coping mechanisms that seem super intuitive, like, oh, this will definitely work if I, kind of like the thing we're talking about breakups. A girl breaks up with you and you think, okay, what I need to do is go to her house with a boombox over my head or a handwritten letter telling her how much I really love her, and then she'll come back to me. So we have like these intuitive coping mechanisms that we think will make our situation better, and all they do is make it worse. So in a more general sense, are there things that you see, like, a guy is either, a relationship loss, a job loss, a bad health diagnosis? Like, are there things that we will typically jump into to try to respond, and it turns out we're completely going the wrong direction?
Okay, I'll let me tell a quick story and then I'll make this brief for you.
Okay, great.
When relationships, people try to cope through malice, right? They tried it in passive aggressive behavior. And I'll tell you a story about my Aunt Margaret and I'll shut up about it. Okay. So my Aunt Margaret was a nice lady, but it was really known throughout the family that her husband was, he was unfaithful. He was unfaithful in a relationship through a long period of time. Okay. And she was the dutiful wife that endured this for, 20, 30, 40 years. Okay. And her husband had, fell ill and got very sick, and he wasn't able to care for himself. And so she had to care for him, and his health was failing in his house. So he got up off the couch one day and he couldn't make it to the bathroom, and he fell and he laid there in his own piss and he peed on himself. And she had to go to him and attend to him. And she looks at him. She's like, "Where are your whores now, Jerry?
Oh,
where are your whores? Where are they? Are they helping you? Are they clean?" And so,
wow,
that was her coping with that, right? That's a bad way to cope. Okay. What you see a lot of times, you'll see guys taking things that are good coping skills turn to bad coping skills. Okay. If you go to the gym, you'll see a ton of these guys. Okay?
Interesting. Yeah.
All right. Like, just take something that's positive and make it a negative. All right. Anything that has to do with a substance is not the way you cope with your hardship. Okay.
Yeah.
If you like a glass of bourbon in the evening, then have a glass of bourbon in the evening. Don't have a bottle and say that's how you cope and that's how you make your life better. Okay. Because it's not. Also, you don't cope with a bad relationship by adding another bad relationship to the mix. Okay. You'll see a lot of guys say, "Oh, my marriage is shit. Well, I'm going to get me a girlfriend on the side. And I deserve that." Okay.
And that's in reality, When in reality, that's when you have a baby.
Right. I can't believe people don't know that. All right. Those are the negative. I mean, there's a ton of them. I could give you an hour of negative coping skills, right? And things that people do that are misguided or misled. And I can make some. Go ahead.
Isn't it so weird how they feel so natural? Like when you're in the middle of it, you feel like, of course, this is exactly what I have to do to solve this problem. And it's usually the opposite of what you do to solve the problem.
Yeah, it's exactly. I mean, it's like, this person broke up with me. I need to stalk them. They'll take me back. Right. That kind of thing. If you guys had any time, I did have a question for both you guys.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Okay. One thing that I've noticed in my practice and in my life is I've noticed that the nature of being a man over the last 40 years has changed. And I know that one of the things that I get a lot of good feelings about is the 13-year-old young man who lives in my house.
Okay.
He is not always successful, but I know that I am teaching him skills that he's going to need as a man. So if you guys had the opportunity to share a skill that you think a 13-year-old would need to hear about becoming a man and how to be a good man and how to be an effective man, what would that be?
Ooh, great question.
Yeah.
I think I might have an idea. Dan, do you have anything, or you want me to go first?
Yeah, for me, I kind of look at it as, what would I tell my 13-year-old self? That's kind of where my brain went right now, is what would I tell my 13-year-old self right now? And probably the thing would be, and I know I did hear it at that time, but I didn't believe it. And I would need to find ways to kind of reinforce this and show this through actions in a repeated way so that it would register. But don't worry about anybody else. Don't worry about what they're thinking about you. Worry about yourself. Compare yourself to yourself, what you did yesterday. There's always going to be somebody who's smarter, better looking, or not as smart or not as good looking. And so it's completely futile to compare yourself to other people. Only compare yourself to yourself, because you are never going to, be the best or the worst at anything. So it doesn't make any sense. And again, trying to get that message through beyond just telling somebody that, get them to believe it. That's another challenge. And that's where it would take some time and effort and repeated work to get that to register, because I have to still do it to myself. I still have to repeat it to myself, but that would have definitely eased my anxiety and been able to let me kind of focus on what's important to me a lot more easily. And I probably would have accomplished a lot more if I had known that at that time.
All right. I'm going to say the biggest lesson that I wish I had when I was younger, and that I would certainly try to pass off to a son, is whenever you decide that you're passionate about something or even someone. I mean, you got a crush on the girl in your class, or you want to try out for a sports team. It's very hard to do this, but I think this is one of the things that would most directly lead to a better world if men learned this lesson when they were boys. Pursue what you want as hard as you possibly can. Be as serious about wanting it as you can be. And when you don't get it, realize that you're going to be okay, even though you didn't get it. So don't try to talk yourself into, phooey, I didn't really want to go to the dance with her anyway, or I didn't really want to be on the baseball team. No, you really wanted those things really, really bad, and you did everything you could to get them, and you didn't get them anyway, and you're still going to be okay.
That's good. Being intentional about what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And don't make excuses after it fails. I mean, that's the thing we tend to do. We try to tell ourselves a story of, well, it didn't work out, but I didn't want it anyway. It's like, no, you did want it. You wanted it more than anything, and you did everything you could to get it, and it still didn't work out. And that's okay. You're going to be fine. You're going to find something else that you want just as much, and you're going to try for that. And everything that disappointed you about not getting this thing that you were trying to get today is going to help you increase your chances of getting the thing you want tomorrow.
That was way better answer than I thought you were going to give, man. That's good.
Thank you.
So Rob, let's ask your question to yourself. What's the most important thing you're teaching your 13-year-old son?
Well, beside the basic things, right? Not to lie, not to, how to handle the people around him. What I'm teaching him most is to rely on himself and to be educated on himself. Okay. One of the things that I started doing is that, we have over the last 2 years, like we have an environment that is a, media driven environment. So you get a lot of different information. So I've encouraged him to read. And when he's in trouble, I hand him a new book. Okay. So he's in trouble. Okay. You know what? You don't have your phone. You don't have your Xbox. Here's a book. Read this. Talk to me about it. And let's see how it applies to what you're seeing or with the things around you right now.
That's great.
And I try to give him that information, try to educate him, because one of the things that I know that I would really, really benefited from at a young age was being well read and being educated, and knowing that there's not just one angle to a problem. There's not just one way of looking at things. There's a number of different ways to look at things. So I've tried to give that to him, and he's smart enough to where he gets it. At least he tells me he does, and that's almost it's the same thing anyway, right?
Yeah. That's great. I remember one of the conversations you and I had, probably freshman, maybe sophomore year of college, and it was based on some of the stuff we saw our high school classmates going through, which is when you're a teenage boy, the two things you don't want to do: don't drive a car while you're drunk, and don't get somebody pregnant before you're ready to get somebody pregnant.
Yeah. Yes.
There are a lot of stories from both of our high schools where guys did one or both of those things, and it completely derailed the direction of where the rest of their life was going to head. So that's certainly good advice. Very practical advice to give to a young man is don't get behind the wheel of a car while you're drunk, and don't get behind the wheel of a girl that you don't want to get pregnant.
Those are the two things that can impact your life for the rest of your life. That you can
absolutely
when you're younger. Yeah, so I definitely appreciate that. We talked about a lot of smart things back then.
We did. Sometimes I wonder, did we? In some ways, we were so stupid about so many things back then, but there were some things that we understood that I didn't realize we understood.
I was thinking about this about college age, being college age when we were in college.
Yeah,
and I was looking at it from a perspective of like the way your brain develops, because your brain doesn't develop like frontally like really well until like you're in your early 20s, especially for men.
Yeah.
And that was when my belief system and my feelings started to really depart from where the people I was around.
Oh, interesting.
And I think it's cool that we were able to like kind of share that development. We're like, I'm getting smarter about things, and I'm seeing a lot of BS around me. Like my critical thinking is really noticing some things that just aren't quite right. And I thought it was an interesting thought when I had that.
Yeah, I had a conversation when I was married, but still very, very active in the church. It was when I was going to Jim Book's church in Winter Park. And I had this conversation with him where I was like, I'm looking around, Jim, and I'm seeing that most of the people who are very active in the church, they're active because they need a crutch. They're not here because they could achieve anything anywhere, and they're choosing to share their gifts with the church community. They're here because nobody else would have them. So it's hard for me to feel like I have a lot in common with these folks. What should I do about that?
Oh, wow. How do you take that?
I mean, I remember he took it well. He's like, I see where you're coming from. He quoted some hymn where it was basically saying, every hour I need thee, the idea of the Christian talking to Jesus saying, hey, I can't make it without you. And his attitude was like, yeah, I don't really identify with that either. Because Jim is one of the people we know, in that field of Christian ministry, where I do feel like if he decided to be a dentist or a lawyer, he'd probably be a pretty good one.
Yeah.
Where he wasn't there because he didn't have other options, where ministry in general, and youth ministry in particular, based on the experiences we had, Rob. I mean, those are people who, they didn't have the discipline to cut it in the armed forces, and they didn't have the personality to get hired, to work the cash register at Discount Auto. So they went to Bible college.
Yeah. And it's so funny too, because you look at people in the New Testament that were building the church, like you don't have the Apostle Paul showing up on Sunday complaining about the hymns being sung differently, right?
Right.
This is a guy. This is the kind of thing that I think was taught but not absorbed, and that's one of the big. I'm not going to say it's a failing, but it's a problem with the church, in that the message given in the Bible is not the message given to the people in the congregation, which is it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, really, every male character in the Bible, that the lesson, if there was anything admirable to learn about them, at their core, they were adventurers. They were out there doing things that other men were too afraid to do.
Yeah.
And it seems like the modern church, in a lot of cases, it's the opposite of that. It's like the more boring you are, the more we look up to you.
Right. Oh yeah, for sure. The more that you display these behaviors of a domesticated male, the better off you are for your community, which is probably just not the case.
Yeah, I think C.S. Lewis had a quote where he basically said, we castrate the horse and then we tell him to be fruitful and multiply.
Everyone thought he was pretty good.
It isn't that the way of really polite society, which now includes the church for sure. It's like we want you to be a man as we are currently packaging the idea of manhood, and so which is basically we want you to be tame, because it's a lot easier. And this is something I wrote at the introduction of one of our last episodes, Dan, either last week or the week before, where it takes so much less time and effort to raise a weak and harmless man than it does to turn a boy into a good but strong man.
Yeah. So why do you think the church is pushing in that direction then?
I have an opinion. Maybe slightly controversial, but I'll state it.
Okay.
I think the church is probably a victim of a transition of gynocentric worldview.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think, maybe not a bad thing, right? But I do see a lot of that in the church, where like you'll see a lot of guys that come to church and they're like, "Oh man, let me honor my wife in this way," which is good to honor your wife, but it's not good to treat your wife as like this person you must satisfy. Okay, and I think there's a lot of that going on, a lot of that espoused by the church in general.
Well, yeah, I mean that screws up every relationship, doesn't it? When you decide, okay, it's my job to keep this business partner, this spouse, this child, it's my job to just keep them happy all the time.
Happy wife, happy life, right?
We do hear that. Yeah. I might be. I was going to say I'm more cynical, but I'll say I'm just cynical in a different way. I think the reason that we like weaker men at least in Christianity, one could probably say that Islam and Orthodox Judaism don't have this particular problem.
They don't, do they?
But in the church, I think it's because the biggest, most successful churches function with a super strong hierarchy at the top and a bunch of people who just do what they're told at the bottom.
Okay.
They need men. If a man is deeply in touch with his masculinity, he's not just going to do what he's told because he's told. He's going to ask
questions.
Exactly. And so it's a little bit easier if those members, male or female, are just a little bit more tame and willing to, it goes God, the preacher / elders, and then everybody else.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting.
You want to talk about the 3 things that keeps men little boys?
Oh yes, Rob and I were talking about this today. Yes. Yeah. What are the 3 things that guys, and 3 things that are fairly accepted in modern male culture that will keep men acting as little boys? What are they?
Pornography, video games, and marijuana. And none of those things are bad, right? All those things can have their place. But I see this actively happening in men between the ages of 20 to 30, is they spend 50 hours a week on video games, smoke pot constantly, and most of their relationships are on Pornhub. And this is a real problem for a lot of guys. And I do encourage all my clients and all the young people that I see, you want to avoid these things. You want to avoid these things in excess because they're making you behave and act and think like a child.
Yeah, the reason this came up, Dan, with Rob and I today is there was a meme where it was a picture of a little boy being given a PlayStation, and he had a big smile on his face, a chubby little boy, right? And then the next picture was the same person as a chubby man being given a PlayStation 5 with the same big smile on his face. And the caption of the meme was like, "Oh, this makes me smile." And I responded Not with our podcast social media account, but with my own personal one.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. I said, no, this does not make me happy. This makes me sad. And people were like, why does it make you sad? It's like, because this PlayStation is a drug, for this person. It's, a chubby, happy little boy turned into a chubby man. And the whole period in time that we didn't see was him spending probably too many hours playing his PlayStation.
Yeah. That's really interesting. It just kind of came to me as you guys were talking about this. It's, and just mathematically, it doesn't work because there's only a certain amount of hours in a day. And if you're spending the majority of that time not engaged in real life or with other people and other relationships, no matter what you're doing, whether it's, even if you're reading books that whole time, right? I mean, the problem is I think those other things are very addictive, right? They keep you coming back, the marijuana, the video games, and the porn, right? Whereas books aren't really, there's not really, I mean, some people can get into them, but the bottom line is if you were escaping reality and not engaging with people in society and community and just spending time by yourself, that's gonna be a problem in and of itself, but these three things are absolutely a huge problem. So I can see that for sure.
Yeah. And with the, with the metaverse around the corner from Facebook, it's going to get way, way worse. I mean, when you look at what companies are investing in making this thing real, they know that secret recipe for making addictive experiences is going to get blown way out from this thing. And you're going to find people spending even more time in front of screens and less time with other people in the real world and less time out in nature. And we're going to turn into that movie WALL-E where everybody just kind of sits on their couch and gets fat and watches screens all day.
You would be shocked at how many young people tell me all my friends are online.
Yeah.
You would be shocked.
All right, folks. Well, let's turn it around. Let's do what we can.
So speaking of which, so Rob, where can people find you?
Oh, okay. I am the current director of operations at AIM Counseling Group. You can always email me at james@aimcounselinggroup.com, or you can go to our website, aimcounselinggroup.com. Okay, find me there.
Yeah, we're calling him Rob, but his first name's actually James. So
it's James Robert.
James, right? Yeah. So just so people aren't confused. Yep.
And you can go to the website. I have an adequate headshot on there, and I think there's even an option you can schedule on the website, or you can call our number. You can call. So I'm happy to see people. I'm happy to offer a individual session initially. Talk about what you think you may be going on, with no pressure afterwards. Right. If there's no value in it to somebody, then there's no value in it. But most people I do see a lot of value in therapy, and I do. We are beginning to pilot a men's specific mental health program, and we're hoping to be able to expand that into services that may impact the community at large. One of the things you'll see with men's mental health is, young guys, older guys don't get help. But we do have a huge gap in men's mental health, not only for like adult men, but adolescents in the inner city and in poor neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'd like to eventually move to the point to where we can offer maybe in a nonprofit setting, services to those people.
Yeah, that's great, Rob. When you do, please let us know. We'll definitely promote it and have you back on, and then maybe some people actually in the program, if they're willing to talk to us and see from their perspective how it's going and what they're getting out of it.
That's great. I'll make sure I tell all my clients to listen to you guys.
Oof, careful.
There goes the clientele. I'm done.
I know. That's great.
All right. Well, I got a lot out of this, Rob. Thanks for joining us. We'll do it again sometime. I'm sure you'll have some new stories and new insights to offer us. So within the next coming weeks or months, we'll definitely do this again. I got a ton out of it.
Awesome.
Okay. Thank you both very much. I appreciate the opportunity, and real fun, guys. Good connecting again.
Likewise.
Yeah, have a good
Rob.
one. Take care.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for spending time with us on the Mindfully Masculine podcast. If you liked the episode, or you think it would be useful for someone else, please leave us a review and join the Mindfully Masculine group on Facebook. Remember, fellas, don't act masculine, be masculine.